Thank you, Haley. My name, as she said, is Elizabeth Sheets, and I work with the research editing, which is located under the Research Technology Office at Knowledge Enterprise. I'm an ASU alum. I got my degree here in English and have been working in an editorial capacity since 2015. And now I work at research editing, and I think I started there about a year and a half ago. And we work on scholarly writing there, academic research. The bulk of our work there is done on grant proposals and journal articles, although just this year we have started with book proposals. And so we've had some come in, so I have a good idea of what, kind of some of the guidelines for what people are missing. And that's kind of what I thought I would talk about today. There we go. So this workshop is kind of assuming that you've already written a book or are writing a book, that you may already have a publisher in mind. And I'm going to go over just what it is, the components that make up your book proposal. And so this is something that you would be submitting probably with a sample chapter to a publisher to consider your book for publication. So the very first component is your title page, which should be pretty easy for most of us academic writers. We put our name and our, the title of our work and our contact information on pretty much everything we do in terms of academic writing. And then following that, sometimes if your book proposal is going to be, more than 15 to 20 double-spaced pages, you're going to want to include a table of contents that's just for your book proposal. I don't usually see those come in. Most proposals are less than that, so it's not usually an issue. Sometimes the publisher will require one, regardless of the length of your proposal. I don't really go over that in today's presentation. I think a table of contents for the document that you're writing is probably pretty self-explanatory. And like I said, it's not something that is usually done. But again, check guidelines, submission guidelines, and I'm going to be harping on submission guidelines through this whole presentation because it's very important that you consult with your publisher on exactly what they want to go in your proposal. So once you have your title page, kind of like break the ice on that blank white page with some easy stuff, then you're going to want to start thinking about the overview of the book. The overview of the book is going to go right after your title page. But it may not be something that you want to start writing right away. This is going to be your placeholder for it. You're going to want to address it probably more towards the end. Once you've done like an annotated table of contents for your book, it'll be easier to figure out what exactly you want to go in your overview. And the important thing about an overview to note is that it's not really a rehashing of your book. You're not going to write a synopsis or a summary here. You're not going to go over the details of whatever plot or narrative structure that you have going on in your book. What you're really going to want to focus on is what's lacking in the current literature, like what's the issue that you're addressing, and then what's the solution that you're providing, like what's new, what are the new ideas that you're introducing. Those are the things that you're going to want to focus on in the overview. And like I said, you're going to want to start thinking about it now, and you're going to add it here in your proposal, but you're probably not going to really write it, the bulk of it, until after you're done. The next item or the next component in your proposal is your bio. And this is pretty easy. Most of us have them. Anybody who's been writing and research probably has a bio thrown together. I think that you need to tailor it down to be very specific to the credentials and experiences that apply directly to the topic that you're writing about. It's not a good idea to include a CV with your proposal unless it has been requested. Your CV oftentimes has a lot of information that is very, it's not relevant really to what you're writing. So they don't want to waste time. You don't want to waste their time reading it or searching through your CV for the things that are appropriate. So this is the place where you're going to provide just, the publications that you've written or the courses that you taught or the grants that you've been awarded that are directly relevant to the subject matter of your book are going to go in this about the author. Definitely don't spend a lot of time writing your life story or your information from like before. They're not interested really in too much of that at this point. That's something that you want to save for the back of your book. They want to know that you're living in Washington with your spouse and dogs. Like they're going to be the ones that want to know. Are your readers? Probably not. The publisher is not going to really care about that information at this stage of the game. All right, let's see. Once you have your bio done, then you're going to want to get into your target audience. Your target audience are the people that you anticipate are going to want to buy and read your book. Sometimes this is a student population because a lot of scholarly writing is written towards a faculty usefulness, where maybe a faculty member is going to require this for a course, which is great because you have a guaranteed number of people that are probably going to buy your book. But in other cases, we're writing for the general public, or we're writing for colleagues or other researchers in our field. And so you need to think about who those people are and then provide really meaningful insights into who they are and what their desires are and kind of how your book will be attractive to them. That way the publisher knows that there are people waiting already to purchase your book, because at the end of the day, a publisher exists to make money. Yeah, they really want to share your message, but they also, want to get a paycheck just like everyone else. So the more you can really be sure of who your audience is, the more secure they will feel in publishing your book, so that they know that it's going to move at least X amount of copies. And once you've established your target audience, then you can start thinking about competition. So the comparable titles section of your proposal will consist largely of the people the authors and or books that you imagine would be sitting next to your book on a shelf at Barnes and Noble. So start off with a couple hundred words talking about the genre of the books that the genre that your book will belong in. What are the trends and what is missing, and hopefully your book is in that category. And then you want to think about 5 to 10 relevant titles that belong in that genre that would be next to your book on the shelf. It's not recommended that you say that there's no competition for your book. So find some, even if your work is on a new topic, it's probably not a new genre. So you can find some topics there. And also when you're sharing those topics or those books, make sure not to just focus on the success stories. Make sure that you're providing a list of titles that are across the board. It doesn't really matter what the marketing was. The publisher's going to want to know all of the potential competition that's out there for you. And I've listed on here just the little bit of details that you want to supply for each. You don't need to go into writing a summary or, provide a synopsis or anything for those titles, just the author and the publisher, page count, maybe the price. That will give them an idea of what range to price your material at as well. All right, since we were talking about comparable titles, it's a good segue into the next section, which is marketing. In today's climate, marketing and promotion falls very heavily on the author. I think it's kind of unfortunate in terms of a writer, because most writers aren't marketers. But it does help to have a good connection, either in social media, LinkedIn connections, or like Twitter account or something like that, to help start to promote your book beforehand. You need to show the publisher how you have already thought about how you're going to spread the word about your book. And for most of us, the most cost-effective way to do that is through social media. If you're going to talk about social media, you may want to mention numbers, like how many followers you have or connections that you have. But that isn't enough. You'll have to also tell them what's your level of engagement with those followers, and what's your plan for engaging that community about your book, either as it's ramping up and after it's been published. What is your marketing plan? And if you have other speaking engagements scheduled, like book signings or things like that, that's great. And sometimes publishers will help with that, but sometimes they won't. So it's good that if you can have that kind of information available and include that in your proposal. Let's see, I didn't think there was anything else I wanted to cover on that. I know that there are classes at ASU about social media and marketing. So if that isn't something that you're really practiced at, it might be a good idea to look into that for your book, not necessarily for the proposal, but for just the overall publication of your book. Okay. After you've talked about marketing, then you're going to move into the specifications of your manuscript. This is probably just a one-page deal. You're going to give how long is your book, and I recommend that you use a word count, or a word count. Sometimes they will ask for a page count, but word count is general. If the book is not finished, you want to tell them about how long you think it will be, and costs associated with finishing the book. So if there are any special requirements you're going to need, any permissions you're going to need, any special resources that you require in order to finish the book, that will help gauge the length of time that's going to take to finish. If you're waiting, on access to anything, this is where you disclose that information. But again, it's probably just going to be a page. Most book proposals are between like 15 and 30 pages. Lots of times closer to the 15, not counting the sample chapter. So keep this page short. Keep this page short. The next couple things I want to talk about are items that could be requested with your proposal by the publisher, but aren't always. The first one, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is actually the biggest part of your proposal that I was just going to skip over, the table of contents for your book. So different than the table of contents for the proposal. The annotated table of contents is the table of contents for your book, which even if it's not finished, you can map out ahead of time. In fact, it's best if you can map it out ahead of time. As someone who writes books, I know that this is the best way for me to do it. So it should be 3,000 words total. So you can do the math on how many chapters you have, 3,000 divided by how many chapters you have. We'll decide about how many words per chapter you want to include. And what you'll be showing is the accumulated message of your book. Like your ideas will move chapter by chapter. They will build on one another until you come to a really satisfying conclusion. And this will match with the other things that you shared in your proposal. And also this is where you're really going to be thinking heavily about that book overview. So this is what most people think about when they think about an overview of a book, is like talking about what happens in the book. And this is where you kind of get to do a little bit more of that, and talk about, the flow. I'm not really a big fan of that word, but most people understand what that means. So like I said, the ideas will build on each other from chapter to chapter. Like it will make sense the way that they're moving. And if they don't, that's a great time for you to revisit your manuscript But that will be your table of contents. So chapter name, and then a short description of what does that chapter provide, or how does that move forward towards your conclusion. Yeah, this is the meat of your proposal. Spend the most amount of time on this section. Now, like I was getting ahead of myself earlier, the next couple things are just things that the publisher may require. Most of them will want a sample chapter. This is how they assess your writing ability. Please have your chapter edited before you submit it. If it's by us, that's great. If it's by somebody that you want to pay, that's great too. Probably shouldn't be your best friend, probably shouldn't be someone in your faculty community, probably should be an independent person who is not familiar with your writing, because that way they can read objectively and pick apart the things that need to be picked apart. This is a good way for you to let the publisher know that they'll have confidence in you, that you can actually deliver on the things that you're saying that you can do. And thinking back to your table of contents, all of those ideas, now if they read this chapter, they will understand that you're able to communicate those ideas effectively. Because of that, it's important that you don't use your foreword, which oftentimes is not even written by you, or your introduction. Those chapters are really not the best representation of your writing and your writing ability. Choose a chapter that has the real meat, that you feel really confident about, and that shows off your best writing ability. That's the chapter that you want to submit. And like it says, 25 to 50 double-spaced pages, probably the shorter the better, but again, choose the best chapter. And if that's 50 pages, then that's what it is. Let's see. Yep, I covered everything I wanted to say on that. But again, please have it edited. This is what is going to really sell you on whether or not you're a writer. The annotated table of contents is really important, and the sample chapter is next important. It's going to let them know if you really can write this book, especially if the book is not finished. All right, something else that they might ask you for, and this is a big maybe. I've seen this asked and I have seen this not. Peer reviewers, a lot of times, are chosen by the publisher, especially if that publisher is well-versed in the genre that you're writing about, but sometimes they're not. And so they ask that you provide. And I think that a lot of scholarly writers are used to doing this, especially if they have published in journals, because journals usually always ask for recommendations on subject matter experts to review the paper. And so this is kind of the same thing. I don't recommend that you suggest anyone that works at your university or anyone that has worked with you on this project or in the research that you're writing about. Go to your bibliography, the sources that you cite in your work. These are going to be the authors that you want looking at your work and reviewing it for this publisher. Make sure that they are publishing in the genre within the last 5 years, so that their experience and their lens is relevant. And those will be the best reviewers. Those will be the ones that, if they're looking on their own, the publisher would select. Submit up to 10. And again, double check your guidelines on this. A lot of the time, they don't want them. So you don't need to do that work if they're not looking for them. Okay, before you submit, again, please check your submission guidelines from the publisher. They will provide a lot of guidance for writing your proposal. They will include most of the sections that I have talked about in this presentation, because most of these are provided in most proposals. But they may also ask for other things that we're not talking about here today. So if you if you follow your guidelines, a lot of times you will do a lot less work. We've had proposals come into our office that people have put together with their own guidelines, and they have done a lot of work, especially with that book overview, because they have rehashed their entire book into a condensed 3-page essay, and it's just not necessary. And that's a lot of work, and sometimes it can be very stressful. So don't put yourself through that. Make sure that you're following those submission guidelines from the publisher. And as I said before, sometimes a publisher will reject a proposal if the submission guidelines have not been met. So if they say to put your name at the top right-hand corner of every page of your proposal, even though we are living in the electronic age and they don't need to do that anymore, you still need to do it. It shows respect for the publisher. It shows that you've taken the time to give them what they need, and they are more likely, especially if they are a big publisher and they receive a lot of proposals, they're more likely to read yours if it meets their guidelines. And lastly, please send your book proposal to us. We can be your fresh eyes. We will look at it. We will make sure that you're meeting those guidelines. We can check for everything that normal editors check for, which is punctuation, grammar, syntax, flow. But we can also look with, a critical eye from a publishing standpoint, and make sure that you're meeting the guidelines and that you're delivering or proving that you can deliver on the promises you're making in the proposal. Our staff is just really insightful, and I recommend that you use our services because they are free to all ASU faculty and research staff. And with that in mind, I want to let you know that part of this proposal development workshop series, another editor in our office, our senior editor, Terry Christensen, is co-hosting or co-presenting a presentation on grant proposal editing. And he is presenting with Daniel Freud, who is the grant proposal editor for the engineering research. And so if you have an interest in that, although not related to this, I'd encourage you to attend. And that concludes my presentation. And I hope that you find that the information is helpful and useful to you. If you have any questions, you can always email me at esheets@asu.edu, or you can reach out to us at Research Editing. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. There are some accolades in the chat for you to check out. That was wonderful information. I'd like to open it up for questions, if you wouldn't mind. Folks can just simply unmute themselves, or feel free to raise your hand if that's more comfortable for you. But we'd happily take some questions now that maybe Elizabeth's expertise could answer.
Sure.
I actually had a question. If no one else wants to go first, I will. At the beginning of the presentation, I heard you mention that this was geared for people who probably have a publisher in mind. But I was wondering if you might have a little advice for someone who doesn't have a publisher yet, maybe a student who is just getting started in this world and is kind of looking to publish in the future. Do you have any advice there?
You mean on terms on how to find a publisher?
And then how to find a publisher, or how to just kind of set themselves up for success in the publishing world?
I think I'm not sure on how to set yourself up for success in the publishing world. I could say try and give the publishers what they're asking for is your best bet. Know your market. If you're do your research on the market and what's trending. A lot of people write to trend, and that helps them publish books, but also a lot of people bring a lot of new ideas and they run and they go. So it's really hard. It's so hard to know. But if you're writing about, research that is like relevant to contemporary, to contemporary society, then you probably, you stand a good chance if you have a decent proposal to pitch. I recommend that you do a lot of research, that you go and look at the other books on the shelf, or look at what your faculty are recommending for their students to read and why, and depending on what your plan is for your book.
Thank you. Crystal, I see your hand up. Would you please?
Hi, thank you. I think you're writing a book.
Mhm.
Have so this is helpful actually to know that these resources exist at ASU. I have a couple questions. One, what does social media mean nowadays with sort of the disillusion of science Twitter or X and whatever the heck that is now to like lesser used platforms like Blue Sky and what's the other one? Mastodon. Like there's really not like a unified science community online anymore. So I guess what does this mean in terms of what publishers are looking for social media?
I would say that I can't speak on behalf of publishers. As an editor, I don't work for a publishing house, but I can tell you what I've seen, and that is that um, LinkedIn has a pretty good community. And I know when I was working at Biodesign, um, Twitter was really active in the scientific community. I don't think really Instagram or TikTok would be a place, would be a place for that kind of discourse. But I think Twitter, a lot of the people in our scientific community were very active on Twitter. And I noticed as an editor, all of the people that come to me for editing, I always follow them on LinkedIn, because when they publish, they share that information in that forum. And so I have found that there's a lot of information there. I don't know that the community feels really tight knit or anything, but there is a lot of marketing going on there. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Hi, Elizabeth. I have a question. Oh, thanks, Karen. So you mentioned that the ROT research editing services are free. Is there a specific topic area that someone's work would need to be in to use those services, or are they open for all topics?
They're open for all topics. We are not subject matter experts in any, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Like our senior editor is a professor in psychology, and he does have some knowledge in that area. But editing for the things that we're editing for, like we can tell if by reading through your proposal, if you're communicating your ideas, then we should be able to understand them. We shouldn't need to be a subject matter expert, and neither should your publisher, in order to read and understand your proposal, because most publishers publish in multiple genres. And so they're not going to know all the ins and outs of every little scientific bit of research that's going on. And so if they can't understand your proposal, then that's probably going to be problematic. And that is something that we can help you with.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. This was really informative and really enlightening.
I'm glad.
I wondered if, as you've helped prospective authors with proposals, are there any common mistakes, things you see regularly that maybe it would be good to share with the audience?
The two things that I noticed the most are that, and the reason why I harped on it so much is that they're not looking at the guidelines from the publishers, and they're submitting proposals based on what they want to share or what they think the publisher wants. And so when we go to edit it and we're looking at the publishing guidelines, we're having to go back to the author and say, you need to rewrite this completely because you haven't given them what they've asked for. So that is when it seems like it should be something that people naturally do, but for some reason it is not. And I have noticed that in all of the different editing that I do in articles for journals and grant proposals and everything. The writers think that they know what they're doing, or not what they're doing, but what the publisher wants. But the publisher is actually telling you what they want. And if you deliver it to them, that's great. The other thing is writing the book overview. a lot of times they really are condensing their book into an essay and providing that as an overview. And most times that is not what the publisher wants. The publisher wants to know how your book is contributing to the existing literature. Like, what are you adding and how are you doing that? And that's what they want that overview to be about, is like, what hole are you filling in the literature? You know, what are you offering? That's what they're looking to know, not necessarily like the synopsis of your book.
Mhm.
So those are the two things that I would say are the most noticeable.
Great, thank you.
We have a couple questions in the chat about recommendations on publishing houses, given the audience and topic. Is that something you can give any insights on about maybe book negotiations?
I can't give any feedback on book negotiations. I'm not an agent, and that's probably what you would need for that. I can tell you that the best way to narrow down the list of publishers that you want to go to is to see who other people who publish in your genre are using. And also you can pay attention to what those publishers are offering those authors in terms, not just in terms of like of royalties or anything like that, but in terms of like, what are they doing for marketing? That's really going to be the most important thing for moving your book, is like, how connected are you? And a lot of publishers have gotten relaxed because people are self-publishing now, and that's, you know, that changes the game a little bit, makes authors more responsible for marketing. So that's important to look at. So like I was saying, who are you publishing with? Who are the books next to yours on the bookshelf in Barnes and Noble? Those are the publishers that you want to make on your list. Also your resources, the sources that you're citing in your work, those authors, who are they publishing with? That'll give you a really good starting place for publishing houses that are already publishing your topics and your genre.
And then one more question. Could you tell us a little more about the process of making corrections while you're editing?
The process of making corrections? What
Yeah. The question is, what is the process of making the correction? So if you're editing and there's a mistake on a book, how do you make those corrections?
Okay, so everything that gets submitted to us must be submitted in a Word document. And we use the track changes in there. We make comments and suggestions. Sometimes we will delete things or reword things, but those things are scratched out, and you can definitely accept or reject any changes or suggestions that we make once we send the document back to you.
Great. Well, are there any other questions? Not hearing any.